Welcome back to the Hood News Fantasy Football Podcast. This is episode 108. I got nobody with me here today. I am recording this episode solo. This is the Week 13 Studs and Duds. Hopefully, because nobody's here, I'll be able to get through it quickly, and you guys won't have to listen to me talk for 40 minutes or however long these normally take. So, anyways, let's go ahead and jump straight into it. At the very top, QB stud Patrick Mahomes, 29.44 fantasy points, did his thing against Dallas. It's what we've been saying most of the season. Play your quarterbacks against Dallas. Play everyone against Dallas. The defense is terrible, and quarterbacks, everyone usually pops off against Dallas, so nothing new there. Jordan Love, 25.76 fantasy points, was able to bounce back in a divisional game against Detroit, and they ended up with the win, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So that ended up being a good game for him and a good game for the team, which is nice. They needed that win. Next on the list is Marcus Mariota on, was it Sunday night when in that last overtime game where they went for two and they didn't get it. 23.26 fantasy points. Pretty bad week for quarterbacks this week. So very unfortunate for everyone else that didn't perform well enough. We had a lot of dud performances for sure. But yeah, those are the top three. Everyone else is a pretty decent performance. I wouldn't say stud performance, so I'm not going to keep going here. Into wide receivers, at the very top, a name I don't think we've heard at the top of the list this season, AJ Brown with 30.2 fantasy points. Just really went and tore up Chicago just for them to lose. 12 targets, 10 receptions, 132 yards, and 2 touchdowns. This is kind of what you wanted to see out of AJ Brown when you drafted him. They played Dallas week 1, and he had 1 target, 1 reception, 8 yards. But, week 13, I mean, the last 3 weeks, it's been a lot of AJ Brown. So week 11 against Detroit, 11 targets, 7 receptions, 49 yards. Last week against Dallas, 10 targets, 8 receptions, 110 yards, and a touchdown. This week against Chicago, 12 targets, 10 receptions, 132 yards, and 2 touchdowns. They have a very good schedule for passing. They get the Chargers next week, which is tough. Then they get Vegas, Washington, both really good matchups. Washington being divisional, and then they get Buffalo week 17 for the fantasy finals. So, I mean, if you traded for AJ Brown for the low, you definitely came up big. He's been excellent these last 2 weeks. So props to you if you traded for him. I actually declined a bunch of different offers that I had to acquire him for low, but yeah, that was probably not a good idea. Probably bad on my part. Anyways, let's move on. Rashee Rice, 25.4 fantasy points. We talked about playing against Dallas. Nothing new there. Dontavian Wicks, who seemed to be Jordan Love's favorite target on Thursday night when they played on Thanksgiving. Or it was a Thursday afternoon game, I should say. Or that was the morning game. Thanksgiving Day game. But yeah, he ended up getting 2 touchdowns, did his thing against Detroit. I don't think he does it again this year. He might. The next week they play Chicago, so another divisional matchup for them. But yeah, he had 7 targets, 6 receptions, 94 yards, 2 touchdowns. So good performance by him. Jameson Williams, who picked it up because Amon-Ra St. Brown got injured. We'll talk about him later. But 10 targets, 7 receptions, 144 yards, and a touchdown. And then he gets to Dallas next week. So very nice. Very, very nice for Jameson Williams. CeeDee Lamb, next on the list, 20.7 fantasy points. Finally, CeeDee Lamb has himself a good game. This is his first game in half PPR over 20 fantasy points. And he was drafted, I think, top 5 picks in the draft, top 7, we'll say even. He's been quietly not that good this year. George Pickens has been really stepping up and really showing up in that offense. So CeeDee Lamb's been kind of quiet this year. But they get Detroit next week. That's Thursday night game. So we'll see if he can do it again. Adonai Mitchell, last on the list, 20.7 fantasy or 20.2 fantasy points. Had his breakout game. He finally went out there and did his thing. And honestly, he looked happy in his post game interview. He talked about like, his little celebration that he hit after he caught the touchdown. He was like, man, I've been waiting to do that my whole career and blah, blah, blah. And so, but he looked like he was in a good mood. He's really happy. Nice to see that. It'll be interesting to see how he plays alongside Garrett Wilson week 15 when Garrett Wilson is supposed to come back. It might actually open things up for him with Garrett Wilson there because he's operating as the number one, so he's getting most of the coverage. So Garrett Wilson being there might actually help him to be able to score even more. So Adonai Mitchell will be a player. We'll talk about him in the waiver episode for sure. But yeah, that's it for the wide receiver studs. A couple more names. Devontae Adams scored 2 touchdowns. He's a touchdown machine. 19.8 fantasy points. Devon Vele, we'll talk about him in the waiver episode. Terry McLaurin in that overtime loss, 19.1. So a couple more names there. Let's move on to running backs. At the very top, Bijan Robinson, who unfortunately this year keeps getting sharked by Tyler Algier. So we don't really see him as the number one performer each week. Or as often as you might have hoped if you took him super early in the draft. But he did his thing, 23 touches, 142 yards and a touchdown, 5 receptions on 7 targets, 51 yards through the air. Got it done against the Jets. He gets Seattle next week, so that'll be a real test for him. Next on the list, DeAndre Swift, 20.3 fantasy points, 125 yards on 18 carries and a touchdown. Only 1 reception for 13 yards through the air. Good stuff for DeAndre Swift. It's been looking like the Kyle Monangai show recently, or lately, I should say. So good to see him get out there and do his thing. Kamani Vidal, who I talked about in week 11 before the bye, and I talked about in week 10, and that he has a good game and then a bad game, and then a good game and then a bad game since he played week 5 when O'Marion Hampton got injured. He had 2.4 fantasy points. Then week 6, 21. Then 5.5 points. Then 19.2. Then 3. Then 17.3. Then 2.2. And then 20 against the Vegas Raiders after the bye. So if this trend continues, if O'Marion Hampton is not back week 14, I would be skeptical to start Kamani Vidal. He just does good, then does terrible, then does good, then does terrible. So following that trend, he did good. He's going to do terrible against Philly. So, but with O'Marion Hampton, if he's back week 14, you definitely don't start Vidal under any circumstance. RJ Harvey, next on the list, who's kind of doing his thing now, especially with no J.K. Dobbins. It's just him in the backfield. He has a tough schedule upcoming. Vegas will be good, but then they get Green Bay, Jacksonville, Kansas City for the finals. But 19.7 fantasy points, scored 2 touchdowns on 35 yards on the ground, 27 yards through the air. But yeah, this is what you want to see out of those rookie running backs that you draft. Chuba Hubbard next on the list. Seemed to kind of do his thing, 19.4 fantasy points against the Rams, who have been very good against the run, but he got a receiving touchdown. He had two targets, 2 receptions, 41 yards, and a touchdown through the air. And then 17 carries for 83 yards on the ground. Yeah, it's been interesting between him and Rico Dowdle and kind of that whole dynamic. I wouldn't have started either of these guys against the Rams, but lo and behold, I mean, if you had no choice and you flexed Chuba Hubbard and he did what he did this for you this week, I mean, props to you for starting him. Last but not least on this list, Kyle Monangai to go along with DeAndre Swift. 19 fantasy points, 22 rush attempts, 130 yards, and a touchdown. They just dominated Philly on the ground. So, yeah, that duo has been pretty good. DeAndre Swift and Monangai. At this point, I kind of feel like I'd rather have Monangai. He just seems to have more upside. Well, I don't know. I feel like they give him more of the goal line work than Swift. But both those backs, it's turning into like a 1A, 1B, like we have Gibbs and Montgomery, how they were in Detroit. So it's turning into that now in Chicago. But it's working. So why stop doing that, you know? That's it for running backs. Let's move on to tight ends. At the very top, a name that you usually are used to seeing. Brock Bowers, 20.3 fantasy points, caught 2 touchdowns in that game against the Chargers. Caught the only 2 touchdowns for the Raiders this week. 4 targets, 4 receptions, 63 yards, 2 touchdowns. Yeah, I mean, Brock Bowers is an interesting player this year. He's been interesting in that he, I think week 1 he got injured, or week 2, and he just kept playing injured and then went out for 3 weeks. And then after the bye week came out and dominated, got, 3 touchdowns on 13 targets, 12 catches. And then since then, kind of, iffy, not too crazy, not too bad, but yeah, it's I don't know if this is just a product of his injury or if it's just Geno Smith is just that bad or the offense just doesn't move the way it's supposed to. But yeah, if you drafted Brock Bowers early, he hasn't produced the way you expected he would, like he did last year. Next on the list, a name we're all very familiar with on the tight end studs, Trey McBride, 18.2 fantasy points, 9 targets, 8 receptions, 82 yards, and a touchdown. He has 4 touchdowns in the last 5 games. If you extend that to the last 7 games before the bye, including, he has 7 touchdowns. He's been, with Jacoby Brissett, he's been just a dominant force. Always getting open, always getting in the end zone. Just top tier tight end 1 probably on the season. I think I have to look into the numbers, but he's a beast, man. He's the best player on the Cardinals right now, and probably has been the best player on the Cardinals. He's just possibly the best tight end in the league. Bowers may be close, but it's him and McBride. They're the top 2. Zach Ertz, 15.6 fantasy points in that game that went into overtime. He did his thing. He had 13 targets, 10 receptions, 106 yards. No touchdowns, unfortunately. I think he was targeted in the end zone a couple times. He just couldn't come down with the ball, so it could have had a much bigger game. Travis Kelce, 13 fantasy points, who, Kelce has been steadily okay. He hasn't done terrible. He's got a pretty safe floor. His lowest game was against the Giants week 3, 4.6 fantasy points. But, I'll take that over some other tight ends, man. And he wasn't drafted too late he's probably going 6th round-ish, 7th round. I can't remember in the draft. So he wasn't going too early, but dude, he does some good games. He has very tough matchups upcoming, but the Chiefs are in a situation where if they don't win out, they might not make playoffs. And so they're going to be going hard. And Andy Reid's going to be coming up with something, especially since they got Houston this week, then the Chargers. Tennessee, I'm not too worried about for them, but even the Chargers, not too worried. But still, divisional matchups can go either way anytime. So, but yeah, Houston this week will be a huge test. Andy Reid will come up with something. I think Kelce will be just fine. Honestly, even though he's got tough matchups, I think he'll get it done. They'll find a way to get him the ball. Last but not least, Brenton Strange, who we will talk about in the waiver episode. And we actually talked about him in the last waiver episode and the waiver episode before that. So We brought him up multiple times. If you didn't get him, tough. But yeah, he's been a good weapon for the Jaguars, and they are making a huge push for the playoffs. So that team has been doing pretty good. So that you definitely want pieces of that team. That's it for the studs. We're going to go ahead and move on to, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the duds list since, it's just me this week. I actually want to call out Max Brosmer. He had negative 3.06 fantasy points. I'm bringing him up because there's another player out there that you need to know about that was a product of that performance. Just terrible. At the very top, Sam Darnold, if you're still starting him for whatever reason, did terrible. Didn't do his thing out there. He had, 3.12 fantasy points. Seattle defense did all the work. Minnesota didn't score a single point. So Darnold didn't have to do anything, but he had 2 fumbles, lost 1. Didn't have any turnovers besides that fumble. Didn't throw any picks. Interesting. Lamar Jackson, 6.54 fantasy points. Something's wrong with Lamar. I wish I had, some hoodnies to talk to about this, but something's wrong with Lamar. He's just, my guess is that he's not healthy. That's what speculation has been. And I may be falling in line with that mentality that he's just not healthy. And so it's like, what do you do if you're the Ravens? Do you sit him a game, let him actually recover more? Does he need more than 1 game? They're top of the division right now. I think they're two games ahead of the Bengals, 1 game ahead of the Steelers. I have to go back and check. I don't know that division like that, but they play in Pittsburgh this week, so they got to win this game. It'll be, I just, the last 3 games for Lamar, 4.72 fantasy points, 7.22 fantasy points, 6.54 fantasy points. And it's like, he missed 3 games due to injury, came back against Miami, did his thing, played Minnesota, did all right, had 4 touchdowns against Miami, 1 touchdown against Minnesota, and then 2 interceptions against Cleveland. Only 153 yards against the Jets, and then an interception against Cincinnati. I think he also had a fumble, a couple of fumbles or something. I don't know. He has not looked good, man. Something's wrong. CJ Stroud, if you start him coming back from injury, I don't know why you would. I'd rather they play Davis Mills. That team looks a lot better with Davis Mills. But they did end up winning against the Colts, so I guess, it was good. He didn't throw any passing touchdowns, had 1 interception in that game. Caleb Williams, 9.46 fantasy points. The running backs did all the work, so he didn't really have to do anything. Matt Stafford, 11.62 fantasy points in an upset loss where they got upset by the Carolina Panthers. 2 interceptions, a fumble to seal the game. Tough day for Matt Stafford, who was having, a pretty good, MVP season, and it should still continue it, but that's football. Every week, anything can happen. So, back to Lamar, he did have 2 fumbles that were recovered by the other team. All right. This is going to be the fun one. This is wide receiver duds, and there are a lot of them. So, Amon-Ra, who got injured with his ankle injury, got a donut. Zay Flowers, 0.4. Justin Jefferson, man, this one hurts. 1.4 fantasy points. Sorry, back to Zay Flowers, it was negative 0.4 fantasy points. So he had a fumble, he had 2 receptions, 6 yards on 7 targets, and a fumble that got him negative 0.4 fantasy points. Terrible. He should have been above Amon-Ra. Khalil Shakir had 1 fantasy point. That was BBTV's trade for target. So if you traded for Khalil Shakir, good for you. Back to Justin Jefferson, man. 1.4 fantasy points. I mean, dude, this is a player that's like, oh, go trade for him. It's Justin Jefferson. They have such good matchups upcoming. They got Washington, Dallas, Giants, and then Detroit. All very good matchups for wide receivers. But just the QBs have not. JJ McCarthy sucks. Max Brosmer is worse somehow. It's just not a good situation for Justin Jefferson. You got to feel for the guy, man. It's tough. Rome Odunze, 1.8 fantasy points. Everything went on the ground, so nothing for Odunze. Michael Pittman, 1.8 fantasy points. Played a tough Houston defense. He got clamped. JSN, 3.3 fantasy points. Tough, man. In a game where it's Seattle versus Minnesota, Seattle defense did everything. And Sam Darnold's not that good. So, he's been playing pretty decent, but he just, when push comes to shove, he can't really get it done. So he hasn't been able to get it done. So, last few games for him have been pretty rough. He had a decent game against Tennessee, but yeah. Anyways, JSN, you didn't expect to see that out of him. People brought up the fact that he's going to beat the wide receiver record for, most yards in a season and stuff like that. And, people gave him a bunch of bad luck. Darnell Mooney, who was the starting receiver with no Drake London, 3.5 fantasy points. It was all Bijan. DJ Moore, 3.7 fantasy points. I just feel like you can't really trust Chicago wide receivers. You either get a really good game or you get a dud game. Both of them are kind of hit or miss. DJ Moore, 20 fantasy points week 9. Or 20.98, where he threw a touchdown, caught a touchdown, and ran a touchdown in, or something like that. So, or threw a touchdown, rushed a touchdown. I don't know if he caught one even. And then 0 points against the Giants in a game that he played, straight donut. And then 2.6 fantasy points against Minnesota week 11, and then week 12, 20.9 fantasy points, and then this last week 3.7. It's just too hit or miss, too streaky. I don't even want to go through Rome Odunze's box scores. But yeah, I feel like you can't trust these receivers at all. It hasn't gotten better for either of them. Yeah, not good. Brian Thomas Jr., Bum Thomas Jr., 3.8 fantasy points. It was Jacoby Myers and Brenton Strange doing their thing, So he's a bum, certified. DK Metcalf, he had 4.7 fantasy points. That Steelers team, man. Aaron Rodgers is like a cancer. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but every team he goes to just crumbles, man. Absolutely crumbles. Yeah. DK Metcalf, 4.7 fantasy points. He's tough. Michael Wilson, 5.1. I put him in here because I thought I could start him with Marvin Harrison being back, and he was going to do just fine. He did not do just fine. So if anyone else had the same thought process as me, we all failed. 5.1 fantasy points, tough. And then Jalen Waddle with 5.5 fantasy points in a game where they're playing against the Saints, and they're at home. You expect more out of Jalen Waddle, but he didn't really do so well before the bye, and after the bye, he's still not doing so hot. So I don't know. It's not really looking up for Jalen Waddle. But obviously you can't bench him, so kind of stuck with him. But that's it for wide receivers. Ton of them there. Let's move on to running backs. Not too many in this running back category. We had Aaron Jones, who got injured, 2.5 fantasy points, and they didn't even score once. So Pacheco, who came back from injury, 4.3 fantasy points, didn't really do much. Etienne, 4.6 fantasy points. Tootin got the touchdown, so he didn't get enough work or enough of a score. And then Saquon Barkley, man, 5.6 fantasy points. Kind of been the story with Saquon this year. I think he had one good game against the Giants, week 8. But other than that, he's had some decent games here and there, but just not where you drafted him, not what you expected out of him. And I really feel like it's that, post Super Bowl kind of slump. You win the Super Bowl, you did it. You know what I mean? You accomplished everything you need to accomplish. What else is there to accomplish? He was so close to beating I think the running back rush yard total last season, and he didn't. So he's like, why run your body into the ground again like that? There's some statistic about like if you're a running back and they just absolutely run you into the ground, the following season typically tends to be like a slow season for that player because they just you get overworked one year and the next year you can't you don't really keep up with that. Anyways, Saquon Barkley, tough for him. He's got really good matchups. The last 3 weeks he plays Vegas, then Washington, then Buffalo. All good matchups for running backs. They get the Chargers week 14, but the final fantasy playoffs are going to be, they're all very good matchups for him. But that's it for running backs. Let's move on to tight ends. Just a couple names in here. Cade Otton, who I talked about being I can't trust him. I forgot what was my reasoning, but he hasn't been good the last few weeks. He had 2 targets, 2 receptions, 9 yards against Arizona, who has not been very good against tight ends anyways. So, yeah, he's probably droppable. You may be able to play him maybe the last 2 weeks of the season, but I don't know. Baker just not looking for him. Oronde Gadsden, who was a huge waiver wire ad middle of the season, especially after that game against Minnesota where he had, 77 yards on 5 targets, 5 receptions, and a touchdown. Since then, he hasn't been very hot. He's got very, very difficult matchups upcoming. They got Philly this week, week 14, Kansas City the following week. Dallas should be good week 16, and then Houston Texans was very tough. So I would be trying not to start him going forward. And then last but not least, Dallas Goedert, 3.7 fantasy points. It's strange. Goddard was doing so well before the bye. I mean, he was a little bit back and forth with his game totals. But I don't know. After the bye week, just came out and they said, you know what? We are not going to give you the ball. We're not going to give you end zone looks. Hasn't caught a touchdown since the bye. Went crazy against the Giants week 6. Had 9 receptions, 110 yards and a touchdown. Then week 8 against the Giants, 3 targets, 3 receptions, 20 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then since the week 9 bye, no touchdowns. So he's kind of touchdown dependent. If he doesn't get a touchdown, you're unhappy with the score. If he gets a touchdown, you're happy. So hopefully he gets one. He doesn't have very good matchups upcoming. So hopefully you get lucky with him. But he also feels like a player I'd be looking away from if I can. But that does it for the studs and duds. Hopefully, none of these guys lost your week on the duds, and hopefully some of these studs helped you win. But that'll do it for this episode. And then we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.